The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's revelation.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. It is Friday. Happy Friday, May 16th. All right, in the news this afternoon, well actually this morning, victorious Trump tour in the Middle East. Everybody, even Democrats, are saying so. SCOTUS is going to be ruling on birthright misinformation. The Comey assassination Codeword, and white Africans, whether or not white South Africans can immigrate to the United States, or if it's racist. All right. First headline today is from the Associated Press. Supreme Court could block Trump's birthright citizenship order, but limit nationwide injunctions. They should rule today or possibly next week. But the Supreme Court seemed intent Thursday on maintaining a block on President Trump's restrictions on birthright citizenship. That's executive order, while looking for a way to scale back nationwide court orders from the lower liberal federal courts. It was unclear what decision might look like. I think it's going to be a split decision. So I think if they're going to go ahead with birthright citizenship for illegals, because that's really the question, but I think they are going to censure the lower courts. How they split that up, we don't know. But a majority of the court expressed concerns about what would happen if the Trump administration were allowed, even temporarily, to deny citizenship to children born to people who are in the United States illegally. That is the point. Not what you hear from, let's say, the National Journal, where Marco Rubio once benefited from birthright citizenship, but that's legal immigration. Now he's open to restricting it, and that's not true. Neither Rubio's parents was a citizen at the time of his birth in 1971 in Miami, but they were here legally, and that's the point. But they're trying to distract people to think that people that come here illegally should be allowed to take advantage of that constitutional right. All right, Law and Crime is reporting that you're still saying generally Amy Coney Barrett enrages MAGA for skewering Trump lawyer during birthright citizenship argument in front of the Supreme Court. And this is what she said. Did I understand you correctly to tell Justice Kagan that the government wanted to reserve its right to maybe not follow a Second Circuit precedent, say in New York, talking about birthright citizenship, because you might disagree with the opinion? The question is one central to the case for the justices. The executive order in question relates to birthright citizenship in the United States. It is the power of the district court to issue a nationwide injunction, which that's the only defense they have, blocking enforcement of that. And whether that indeed is legal for a federal court to file the injunction, a lower one. I don't think so, not over the executive. I think it has to be the Supreme Court to rule on those things. But the real question is, again, whether or not illegal immigrants, their children, should have birthright citizenship. So, not saying legal migrants can't have a baby here and that baby would become a citizen, but they don't take into account in the Constitution whether or not the legality of somebody living in the United States makes a difference. All right, the Federalist, the left's outcry over South African refugees exposes their anti-white bigotry. Moving on to the next story, the league goes off to say, in the Biden area, we saw about infinity pseudo-refugees stream across the southern border for every corner of the third world. But the lib-left establishment isn't so pro-migrant when it comes to a handful of Afrikaners, 59, matter of fact, that were allowed in, given visas and fast track to citizenship. So 59 African farmers, Afrikaners, were allowed into the country, but the New York Times has to say the road to Trump's embrace of white South African farmers, the Trump administration's hostile approach to South Africa, was shaped by the convergence of factors. Is it hostile? Look who's writing this article here. And they say Mr. Trump had floated the idea with John Bolton some time ago about whether the persecuted minority of white South African farmers were worth granting asylum to and giving them a fast track to citizenship, unlike Trump's stance on other, not just migrants, illegal immigration. So these people are allowed in legally. In March, the administration expelled South African ambassador after he criticized Trump for playing to white grievance in America and warned of a global protective movement that is beginning to envelop embattled white communities. So what they're talking about here is whether or not people that are white should deserve immigration asylum, even if they're being persecuted in South Africa. So it's whether or not you think that white farmers are being attacked and killed. Now, the government says that actually, Carolyn Levitt said today, Afrikaner refugees who arrived in the United States today shared their harrowing stories of discrimination and persecution in South Africa, including 2 violent attacks, vandalism of property, death threats, racial slurs against farmers, political songs, calling for the death of all Boers or Afrikaners, which are the Dutch, you could say, colonialists. Affirmative action laws that prevent many of them finding work, and the government, and at a minimum, did not respond to the request for help. And so what they're talking about here is the government, the most recent government, is pulling back protections for white South African rural farmers, and those people are being attacked criminally. So it's not necessarily by the government. Since the end of apartheid in 1984, the government has made efforts to undo the economic imbalance, says the New York Times, created by the system, including through programs created to redistribute land to black South Africans that have been seized by the former, and they put in colonial farmers, but it's not really colonialists anymore. It's descendants of colonialists and apartheid governments. That's not necessarily true. Some of these white farmers did not inherit their land over generations. Now, the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, this year signed a law enabling the government to take private land without compensation if it was deemed in the public interest, and that's the whole point. So they're seizing land from white farmers without compensation, and they're pulling back law enforcement protection. So these people are susceptible to attack, political and violent criminal attacks. So while the gruesome killings of white South African farmers, says the New York Times, in South Africa have captured national attention, police statistics show that the farmers are no more vulnerable to violent crime than any other people in the nation, not per capita. So they skip that. The fact is, South Africa is very violent. There's a lot of crime, but for the amount of population the white South African farmers are, they're being attacked more. U.S. official and Afrikaner activists have pointed to different South African political parties' rallying cry. Okay, so this is political. Kill the Boer, and that is the Afrikaners. As evidence that the white South Africans are being targeted, I've seen this on film. So Boer means farmer in Dutch and Afrikaans. The African National Congress distanced itself from the chant years ago after Mandela came into power. But before, even when Mandela was in jail and before he was in jail, they had to distance themselves from that to be considered, but they did use it. All right, next story coming up is the good story today. Apparently, FBI Director used a code word spelled out on a beach and put it on his Instagram. And the code word was 8647. And OIA is reporting that former FBI Director Comey being probed by U.S. Secret Service after sharing alleged subliminal, okay, some say it's subliminal, I don't say it's subliminal, Trump assassination social media post. This is on Instagram. The New York Post is reporting Secret Service probing ex-FBI Chief Comey for allegedly threatening Trump and since deleted, so he deleted it, 8647. So if he's not guilty, why did he delete it? And of course, the big news is Tulsi Gabbard calls for jailing former FBI director for suggested death threat against President Trump. So he should know better. Or shouldn't he? I mean, this guy works with intelligence services. I think he knows what he's doing. And then the post-millennial, James Comey pleads ignorance, deletes post from threatening Trump. DHS and Secret Service are investigating. We are aware of the recent tweet by FBI Director James Comey, said President Trump. At President Trump, said Kash Patel, head of the FBI. What becomes of it, we don't know. Okay, moving on to the next headline. Speaking of intelligence services, Zero Hedge, why is the secret German spy report on the AfD party only filled with public statements? So if you don't know what's going on here, the AfD, or excuse me, the BND, also known as this part of the BND, the BFV, has been spying on the AfD, and that's the far-right party in Germany, with scrutiny and surveillance that the other parties don't receive. But the thing is that they're not revealing what they found. They're just relying on people's rhetoric and ad hominem attacks on the AfD. So as you know, the AfD is the most popular party in Germany, but they were cheated out of majority in some sort of funny business with the elections. And so they teamed up with the next conservative party, the Social Democrats. The Social Democrats? No, it's the other, Christian Democrats. And so they formed a coalition that the Social Democrats wanted to disrupt, but the AfD is still the most popular. And they're being spied on by the state. I don't know why. Because of the right wing. So the story goes on to say, we already know that the BFD is secretly surveilling AfD members in certain German states, mostly in the east, and the parts of the confirmed right-wing terrorists already. So the designation allows for the BND in those states that partake in extraordinary surveillance powers over the AfD members, including reading their chats and emails. Presumably, they can also track their browsing history and probably their locations. So what this means for the intelligence community there, the BFV, has plenty of statements, memes, and content used based on private statements. So none of their investigations comes to light except for what they pick up from other people saying, which isn't much. For one, a big part of the apparatus of spy agencies is to obtain information, but not release it to the public. So what they do is they're relying on public statements, like I said, accusations and ad hominem, so they don't have to reel their methods and exactly the information they know that, of course, is used for blackmail and so on and so forth. All right, PJ Media, all Democrats just anti-Trump and nothing else. They state the obvious. And Issues and Insights magazine has grinding down the great green grift. Well, they do have that. If they're not just anti-Trump, they're definitely good on spending. So Issues and Insights here reports For the Democrats, green policies are a blunt object to use for taking down capitalism and controlling the economy. They are also a magnificent vehicle for graft. And that's what all the spending was about. And then it goes into Biden in his last days in office spent $100 billion. And as we know that, a lot of it went to EPA for the Green New Deal, supposedly. So he spent that money, and that's what kept inflation going for what it, as much as it was. The Federalist is reporting New York Times publisher laughably claims his paper reported deeply on Biden's decline, and it did the exact opposite. Here we're getting back to Biden is, everybody realizes that he didn't know what he was doing his whole term. And then if you didn't know who the publisher for the New York Times is, it's Sulzberger. And he wants to rewrite the record on how the New York Times failed to cover Joe Biden's decline. And that's what he said. He said in a speech, I think it was to Notre Dame, that he knows firsthand that New York Times reported deeply on Biden's deterioration. And he said this during his speech at Notre Dame. Next up from PJ Media, we have Ben's Autopen pardons just get invalidated. So in March, the Oversight Project dropped a bombshell memo detailing 32 instances where the Biden House used an autopen to sign off on clemency and pardons. But now the report raises a question, were these acts of mercy issued by a president or by a rogue staffer who had no constitutional, and that's the thing with autopen. We don't know, realistically, we don't know what wasn't autopen during the Biden administration. We just have a clue on the clemency and the pardons. So we have a couple people from the Democratic Party here. Fox News is reporting Democrat says it's obvious to me now that Biden was not in a condition to run for re-election. And this is Ro Khanna. Now, Ro Khanna is a friendly Democrat on the talk circuit, usually on Sunday. And he had said that he noted how obvious it was to him that then President Joe Biden was not in any condition to run for re-election. So Ro Khanna here is admitting, now he's finally coming out, that he knew that there was something wrong with Joe Biden before the election season, I guess, 2023. So, well, that's a kind of a good sign. And the PJ Media is reporting, I don't know if you saw this, Sebastian Gorka slaughtered Politico on its own turf. So Politico had a show just recently on called the Live Security Summit, and where Sebastian Gorka appeared and a lot of other people appeared. And he went off on the host there, Daisha Burns? Daisha Burns. And he called out, how could you, how could you not think it's MS-13 when it had tattoo on the knuckles? And then he dropped the bomb and said, see, this is why Politico is a joke. Now you have to understand that this was Politico's event. So Politico was hosting this National Security Summit news program, and Gorka comes on, and he says, this is why Politico is a joke. This is why you're a gutter press and fake news. Those are the four symbols you said, referring to the tattoos on Briego Garcia's hands, or whether or not you thought that was a gang or it wasn't a gang thing. And then it goes on to say, Daisha Burns goes on to say that we have covered those stories. And then she was talking, Gorka was talking about Rachel Moran and Jocelyn Nangaway. They were killed by illegal immigrants. And he says to her, you haven't covered those stories. You haven't covered the one about Nungare and Rachel Moran. In comparison to the Russia garbage, I mean, let's be honest, really slaughters her on their own new program. So I have to give it, I don't really like Sebastian Gorka, but I have to give it to him. That was pretty entertaining. Just the News is reporting about the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who says no greater threat to American freedom than Biden weaponizing the FBI and its use against U.S. citizens. Not only that, but a candidate for president and then a president, surveilling them and persecuting them unwantedly. Comey's got to go. The Fox News is reporting blue state congressman, and this is Ro Khanna again, ditches Dem playbook and seeks to codify Trump's latest executive order. And this is the executive order regarding lowering prescription drugs. So Ro Khanna is the first Democrat, and he's establishment Democrat, to hop on board with this. So he's been a vocal opponent of Donald Trump, as I said before, and Donald Trump's policies. The president's latest executive order targeting prescription drugs, however, inspired Silicon Valley congressmen to trade political disses for diplomacy. So Khanna is introducing legislation, which is a great thing to do right now because we'll vote for it, which is good. And we have more news about more other Democrats, prominent Democrats, giving Trump kudos. But first, I want to go to this story from PJ Media that says Iran says it will limit uranium enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief. And that's important because that led Democratic Representative Jim Himes to say that Trump gets praise for doing a pretty darn well job on the Middle East tour. So the Intelligence Committee, Jim Himes, praised President Trump's efforts to negotiate that peace in the Middle East. And we're talking about Jim Himes, a Democrat of Connecticut, who offered praise for Trump. Trump has received acclaim for some unusual constituencies in his efforts to strengthen strategic partnerships in the Middle East, he said. And that he thinks it was really good that the U.S. and Iran were getting close to a nuclear deal. Also from the Middle East tour, Sheikh Mohammed from the UAE, that's United Arab Emirates, will invest $1.4 trillion in the U.S. over the next decade following a meeting with Trump. So that's a huge investment. $1.4 trillion over 10 years. You take that down. What is that? $100 billion? $100 billion a year. New York Post is reporting that Trump wants to meet with Putin as soon as we can can set it up. After in-person Russia-Ukraine talks fall through, I don't think we're going to have a breakthrough until President Trump and President Putin said. Marco Rubio, after a meeting at NATO foreign ministers in Turkey on Thursday, Trump had spoken to Putin on the phone several times, they said. But the leaders have not decided because it's really against the leader of NATO, the United States, and Russia, because that's Ukraine is a proxy. So I don't know if you saw this on TV, but Bruce Springsteen was in England, and the Manchester Evening News is reporting Bruce Springsteen is pissed off as he makes explosive statements in historic Manchester gig. And what did he say? He was traitorous himself. He's treasonous and traitorous. In my home, the America I love, the America I've written about, there's been a beacon of hope and liberty for 250 years, and even more so, is currently in the hands, so Springsteen called Trump corrupt, incompetent, and treasonous. The whole administration. I don't like Bruce Springsteen. He had that good album, Born to Run. Excellent album. After that, who the fuck cares? So here's an article from the New York Times. CIA rejects diversity efforts once deemed as essential to its mission. The Trump administration is dismantling programs that some former directors believe shape the agency's competitive edge. Now, what are they talking about here? The Trump administration is talking about DEI, which is different than multiplicity, multi-culti. You know, if the CIA operates in different cultures, you have to hire people that blend in with that culture. General spycraft. But they're making it sound like, because Trump wants to end, and they want to end in the entire federal government, this effort of DEI, which is put race above all else. And in some, in some missions and in some stations, you're going to want to do that. It's all understandable. But they're not talking about that administration. They're just talking about promoting people based on color. After the Cold War ended, and again after the September 11th attack, the string of CIA directors and congressional overseers pushed the agency to diversify its ranks. Why? Because in certain stations around the world, you want to blend in. Okay? You don't want to have a station in Nigeria and have it all white. Goes on to say the drive had little to do with any sense of... See, and this is the point. The drive had little to do with any sense of racial injustice or racial justice, civil rights, or equity. It was rather a hard-nosed national security decision. Exactly. When it's really the question of, we're not talking about promoting the sense of racial justice, civil rights, or equity in any business. You're seeking to hire the best person, and when those persons come with certain racial profiles, that's not something you should consider. It's the colorblind attitude. Specifically in the CIA, like I said, if you have a station in Nigeria, you'd like it to staff it with Nigerians or people of the predominant race in that culture. It's not about DEI, because if you know what DEI is, it's applied seamlessly, evenly across the board. So regardless, in reality, the CIA would probably want to hire, well, whatever. All right. Some illegal alien news. One American News, Colorado Democrat prosecutor gives 15-year-old illegal alien probation after killing drug rehab worker in high-speed crash. And the Colombian teenager, whose name was not reported because he's a minor, stole his mom's Jeep Cherokee, was racing 90 miles an hour down a city street, and hit this woman who was slowly proceeding to a stop, moving through a stop sign. And she was killed. And he gets probation, 2 years probation, and 100 hours of community service. The plea agreement said he'd admit guilt, but he wouldn't have to go to prison for stealing a car, speeding, or reckless driving, it would be, and unintentional manslaughter. You killed somebody because you're recklessness and your illegal behavior. And like other illegal immigrants, you shouldn't even have been here. Which is the main point. You only can drill down from that. All right, Zero Hedge, Maha chief medical advisor demands mRNA COVID jab should have a moratorium. Asim Malhouri, the newly appointed chief medical advisor to make America healthy again. So that's not the federal government. That's Robert F. Kennedy's old agency, who is now calling for a moratorium on the COVID vaccination. More RFK news from PJ Media. Oh, the irony. And they're talking about guess who's thrown out of the HHS hearing. If you didn't see this, Ben Cohen, the founder of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, disrupted with a bunch of younger protesters who were all yelling, RFK kills people with hate, and Congress kills poor kids in Gaza by buying bombs, and pays for it by kicking kids off of Medicare in the U.S. I guess that's what Ben Cohen yelled. You might have seen the clip. Here in more important news, we're talking about undoing the system. Remember when Donald Trump said he's going to drain the swamp? Well, RFK and states like Florida are considering banning fluoride from public water. Medical experts have warned, says the New York Times, that the ending fluoridation will have never negative consequences on health. Excuse me. Show me the study that says drinking fluoride helps your teeth. It should help your bones too, but actually drinking fluoride doesn't help your bones. They say drinking fluoride, not putting it on your teeth, but drinking it. Then why can't you take fluoride pills? How does ingesting fluoride help your teeth? Studies are clear, they say, between fluoridated drinking water and improved oral health. I don't know. I'd like to review those records. But opponents of fluoridation have cited the possibility of cognitive effects on children and infants from excessive exposure. I think any exposure is, and the point in Florida is DeSantis is arguing on the base of consent, confirmed consent. It's forced medication, he went on to say, when they're jamming fluoride into our water supply. He said, I'm not saying that that's not true, fluoride for oral health. What he's saying is that there are other way people can access fluoride. Like I said, if it's so big and you're a big dental enthusiast, maybe you could just take fluoride pills. But like I said, there's no study that shows that ingesting fluoride helps your teeth. Putting it on your teeth helps. But that's a chemical treatment. I'm not going to even read what. I'm not even going to read. Well, let's. So this is what the New York Times said. Most people in the U.S. today have never seen nor personally experienced the severity of tooth decay that exists without fluoride. Say drinking fluoride. Signed in April by dozens of natural and state dental and medical agencies. With an abrupt departure from water fluoridation, our nation could undoubtedly experience a rapidly rise in incidence of tooth decay. How does, like I said again, I will say again, how does drinking fluoride help your teeth? You could put it on your teeth. You could buy treatments. You could buy treatments for your kids if you're worried about their teeth. You're showering with fluoride. I mean, chlorination. There is chlorination of your water supply if you didn't know. I understand that. Fluoride, I do not. Because if you need it to build up health, I think there's enough. I drink natural water. I don't ingest fluoridated water. I get plenty of bone health. If it's that. They don't say bone health. They say tooth health. All righty. Thanks for joining me today. Happy Friday. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe. All right. Have a great weekend. Don't forget you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. I'll see you next week. Respect.
world order.